What is your name?
Erin.
And how old are you?
8.
Will educate children in the schools on what I was failed throughout my education in Illinois. By educating children on sexual abuse in schools, in the elementary level, you are giving them the tools and knowledge to speak up and put a face and voice and be able to reach out and tell somebody if they are being abused. Unlike my childhood, where I couldn't put a face and voice on it, and I stayed silent because nobody was giving me that message, only my perpetrators telling me this is our little secret. Please, I urge you to pass Senate Bill 2843, because as I say, we can't stop these sexual predators. They will always exist. So why not put an extra layer of protection around children to protect them? Thank you.
During my message today, you'll see the importance of what I'm here to talk to you about. 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 6 boys will be sexually abused by the age of 18. There are over 90% of children being sexually abused by someone they know and trust. Yet, in school, at home, what do we talk about with children? Stranger danger. But as I mentioned, 90% of the time, it is someone the child knows and trusts. Growing up in the suburbs of Chicago, I met my best friend in kindergarten. And it was at her house the very first overnight that I woke up to her uncle who lived in the home sexually abusing me. My parents, the school, never taught me you don't keep these secrets, you tell somebody. So I kept it a secret. I didn't tell anyone. Well, something to know about these predators. They don't stop if they're getting away with it. This man repeatedly sexually abused and raped me until the age of 8.5. I wasn't telling anyone. I was keeping this secret with my best friend because he was also abusing her. So how did my abuse end? No, it wasn't that police officer that had taught me for 3 years coming into the classroom about stranger danger. I wasn't learning safe and unsafe touch, safe and unsafe secrets, how to get away until today. No, we moved. I got away from this monster. But I just moved that much closer to the next perpetrator in my life. This time, not that stranger, a family member. At age 11, 5th grade, I woke up to an older teenage cousin sexually abusing me. And for the next year and a half, repeatedly told me, this is our little secret, no one will believe you, Erin. If you tell anybody, you will destroy our family. So instead, I turned to my little pink childhood diary and started to keep my secrets in the back of the diary. Something happened last night, but I don't know who to tell. And word after word, page after page, I described the things my cousin was making me keep a secret. Continuing to threaten me, suddenly it's happening at all the family gatherings while I babysat his 2 younger brothers. So how did that abuse end? Well, as I mentioned, if these perpetrators are doing it to one person, as you hear, they're often doing it to more than one. And my 11-year-old sister blurted out the words one day, Brian's gross. Well, that was that older teenage cousin. So I knew in that moment we had to tell somebody. So we told our parents. As you can imagine, with any parent, they were devastated. As my older sister said, I just can't see him doing this. You see, what they teach you in school about stranger danger, they show you that video of the man with the missing teeth, the greasy hair, looks like he's homeless in the rusty car trying to lure the kids with the candy, or walking up the sidewalk with the leash. But often the people that are abusing kids are not only ones that they know, but upstanding citizens. We got people that work in high-profile jobs, firemen, teachers, youth pastors. I could go on and on. So often, that family member. In my case, also, the neighbor. But not that stranger I had now been taught about for 6 years by the same police officer. And the same time I am finding out my sister's being sexually abused by our cousin, I got that cop teaching us DARE. I still have my DARE card, and you flip it over, it teaches you the 8 ways on how to say no to drugs. I knew the consequences of what drugs do, so I never so much as put a cigarette or was an underage drinker. But where were the 8 ways teaching us on how to get away until today? It never came. And unfortunately, it took finding out my little sister was being abused for my abuse to end. I ended up moving forward with my life, going down a very destructive path, depression, suicide attempt, eating disorders, you name it, because that's something so often that happens to victims. Others attempt different forms of suicide, don't even survive. Turn to prostitution, drug abuse, because so often people that are being abused do not report it until they're in their 30s, 40s, and 50s, because nobody ever gave them the message on how to speak up and tell. The shame that they carry, the fear of not being believed. So after getting my master's in social work, I quit my full-time master level job as a youth and family counselor, making it my mission to pass Erin's Law in my home state of Illinois, requiring that we teach kids once a year on personal body safety education. Teaching kids the differences between safe and unsafe touch, safe and unsafe secrets, how to report this to a safe adult, and to keep reporting it if your abuse does not end. It's as simple as that. 1 hour out of a school year. We teach kids bully intervention, internet safety, as I mentioned there, stranger danger. This is just one more key component we should be teaching kids. I passed Erin's Law in my home state in 2013, and since then, over a decade now, have traveled to more than half the country testifying to legislators to pass this law. As far away as Alaska and Hawaii, and I could tell you today, 37 states have now passed it. Ohio is one of 13 that is not. This is my 3rd time testifying here. 7 years ago I came and testified before committee in the House where it passed, and I've been coming back year after year testifying over Zoom, trying to get Ohio to be the next state, especially because my husband grew up here in the suburbs. Nothing more passionate about getting it passed in my home state and his state. He's even trying to convince me to move here, and I told him I will not live in a state that does not teach this law. So it is my hope today, hearing my message, that you will see the importance of how, had I been educated as a young child, I would have spoken up and told. I am somebody that will not give up on this law as long as it takes me to get it passed in all 50 states. And one final example I will give you is it took me 8 years going back and forth to the state of New York to pass this law, going to the national media, telling these legislators year after year, one day I will bring you the proof of why it was so important for me to get this law passed in New York. It finally passed in 2019 after a lot of challenges I faced, but not giving up. And a year into the first year of having it be taught, a children's advocacy center went in, prevention educator in an elementary school in upstate New York, teaching Erin's Law. Well, just in that 1 hour, 9 kids in that school came forward saying they're being sexually abused. And these 9 kids were all pointing their finger at the same man, not the stranger, but the principal. The principal had been abusing these kids in his office during his what they called lunch buddy program. This went on for 17 years to multiple children. This has hit the national news, and that number from 9 kids that one day has now exceeded more than 30 kids going back 18 years being abused by a principal. This is just one example how 1 hour of education made the difference of more children being abused and stopping this predator who's behind bars. So it is my hope that you will see what the difference this law can make for the children in Ohio. Thank you.
90% of the time, children are being sexually abused by someone they know and trust. And that was the situation in my life. I went off to kindergarten and met my best friend. Her name was Ashley. Ashley lived just up the street from me. We joined Daisy Scouts together, and soon Ashley, towards the end of kindergarten, is asking me to have a sleepover. Well, I had never slept anywhere besides relatives' homes, but I was excited. Mom said, if you get homesick, just pick up the phone, we know where she lives, we'll come get you. That night, we watched Little Mermaid, played in her bedroom with her big dollhouse, and eventually, like 2 little kids, grew tired and fell asleep. Ashley's life was a little different than mine. Ashley came from a home where Dad wasn't in the picture. It was just Mom's 2 children, and there was a male living in the home, and it was Ashley's uncle. He played the caretaker role. Anytime I was over there playing at Ashley's house, it was always the uncle home while Mom worked. Well, this night, I woke up in the middle of the night to that uncle coming in to the bedroom. And you all know where this story is headed. Yes, this man, for the very first, not last time, sexually abused me and told me to keep it a secret. So when my mom picked me up the next morning, did I tell anybody? No, I stayed silent. I didn't tell my best friend. But when she had asked me to spend the night again, of course, I said no. I was terrified of this man. At the same time in kindergarten, I had the local police officer come in and teach us about strangers. Don't answer the door when your parents are gone. Don't take candy from a stranger. And that's what they showed us in the videos. But the reality is, 90% of the time, it is someone the child knows, trusts, and in this case, it was the me. Fast forward, I'm now a first grader. Ashley and I are in the same class. I continue to play at our house because the uncle during the day was always on site sleeping. It was at night when we would see him come home. So I avoided the overnights. Well, this particular one afternoon, as I'm playing in Ashley's back bedroom, that uncle of hers appeared at the door after Ashley had gone to use the bathroom, locked it, and I am now clutching these 2 dolls because I know what this man is capable of. Calling me over to the bed, my best friend is now trying to get in, and I can hear her jiggling the door. And to spare you the details, proceeds that just right before I turned 7 years old, raped me. I can tell you the color shirt this man was wearing, the shoes I wore that day, and one of the last things he said to me is, I know where you live, I will come get you. These were the only things where I was being taught, being threatened to stay silent. Were you wondering, were there any red flags? Well, yes, I started having all these behavior problems, acting out. 2 weeks after this whole assault had happened, I'm being babysat by my grandparents. My older sister's there, and she pulled my shoes off the same exact way this man had done 2 weeks earlier. And I suddenly went from sitting in Grandma and Grandpa's house to reliving that whole assault over again in my head. I'm now freaking out, having this total meltdown tantrum at 7 years old. Go to the back window that led to the backyard, and I'm banging on it so hard, my hand went through the window. My grandfather's now rushing me to the emergency room, going into emergency surgery, and all I'm thinking about is how much trouble I'm going to be in for the window. When I eventually made it back to school with my pink cast, social workers, psychologists, teachers were sitting down with my parents trying to talk about my behavior problems. They put an IEP in place, individual education plan. Some kids is for learning disabilities. For me, they labeled me a behavioral emotionally disturbed child because of my behavior problems. They put goals in place. Erin will find 3 problems proper ways to deal with her anger. But no one was getting to the root of why I was having all these behavior problems. Well, fast forward, now I'm 8 years old, once again in Ashley's house. Went in one day to grab some water, and as I'm about to make my exit to go back outside and play, as I tried to avoid the inside of that house as much as possible, this uncle of hers once again locked me now, not my best friend's room, but his room. And as I'm sitting there panicking, terrified because of what this man had done, begging him, please let me go home. I'll do anything, just please let me go home. This man proceeded to stand up, grab his pocket knife, and I can still describe to you what this knife looked like, put my hand as I'm sitting on his bed over the wooden part of this knife and telling me, this will hurt you a lot more than I will, and proceeded to once again rape me. So how did my abuse finally end? No, it wasn't that police officer coming in teaching me how to speak up and tell when you're being sexually abused. No, my parents put our house for sale, and we moved to a new neighborhood, a new school, and I never saw Ashley again. Well, as I made new friends in my new school, as you probably can imagine, they started asking me to have overnights. Well, as that now 9-year-old, I'm terrified of uncles, the dads, the brothers, the you name it, any male that lived in the house. I trusted nobody. So I said no to all the overnights and always wanted them at our house. Well, fast forward a couple of years later, I am now 11 years old, spending the night in my grandparents' condo in Wisconsin. I'm there with one of my sisters, several of my older cousins. I was the youngest, they were all teenagers. They went to go walk around the town, Grandma blew up an air mattress, and I fell asleep on the floor. Well, once again, just like when I was that little 6-year-old, I'm now 11, waking up to being sexually abused once again. This time, someone I trust even more. He was like the brother I never got, coming from a family of 3 girls. I woke up to my older teenage cousin who lived down the street from me, sexually abusing me, pulling his hands out of my pants. The next morning, I tried to convince myself he didn't do this. This was all some horrible nightmare. Tried avoiding eye contact, but when I got home that night, I opened up my little pink childhood diary, and I wrote the words, something happened last night, but I don't know who to tell. Several months would go by, and nothing had happened. I have now convinced myself it was all some horrible dream, because I had seen my cousin multiple times since that first incident. I am now 12 years old, and I had to pass their house every day on the way to the elementary school. My aunt stops me, this cousin that abused me, and asks me if I could watch her 2 youngest sons. This was the first time she ever asked me, and I said sure. She was just running 30 minutes to go pick up some ingredients for dinner at the grocery store. So as I sat and played hide and go seek with my 3 and 6-year-old cousin, suddenly that cousin of mine appeared coming in through the garage door, saw what I was doing and said, Erin, I've got the best hiding spot for you. Come with me, my brothers will never find you. So I followed him, and we started to go down the stairs, and all of a sudden that gut feeling that something bad is about to happen, I felt it, the hairs on my back. It's something I tell kids all around the world to listen to that gut feeling, because if something doesn't feel right, probably isn't. This cousin led me into their crawl space, where he grabbed a bunch of blankets, had all their holiday decorations stored down there, got on top of me, sexually abused me. And it wasn't until we heard his mother opening the garage door that he said to me, this is our little secret, don't tell anyone. You will destroy our family. So of course, the only education I'm getting is to keep it a secret. So I went back to that little pink diary and started to write about what this cousin had continued to do. And suddenly my aunt is now asking me frequently to babysit, watching her boys while she ran errands, met up with friends. The abuser cousin was always over at a friend's house, hockey practice, was never around until his mother would leave, and suddenly he would come back from practice. His best friend lived across the street. He would see his mom leave, and he would come home and find ways used to trap me in bedrooms, basements, closets, crawl spaces, you name it, sexually abuse me and threaten me each and every time. You will destroy our family, Erin. You have no proof that I'm doing this to you. So I continue to believe these lies, and suddenly now it's happening in the presence of 40 other relatives gathering for the holidays who have no idea what's going on in the garage, in an upstairs bedroom at another relative's home, on Christmas Eve, on Thanksgiving, on the family birthday party for Grandpa. All these different situations, he found ways to isolate me, abuse me, and silence me. So how did this abuse finally end when I was 13 years old? Well, at that same time, that police officer that had taught me all about stranger danger is teaching us DARE, the 8 ways to say no to drugs. I still have my DARE card, and I bring it from one state after another across this country. And I hold up that DARE card and I tell these legislators, I learned the 8 ways, as the card says. 8 ways on how to say no to drugs. But where are the 8 ways on how to get away until today? We don't teach kids that. I knew not to give into the peer pressure of the drugs, of the alcohol. But the only message I got as a kid was not how to speak up and tell, it was how to be quiet and not speak up when I was being abused. So at 13 years old, spring break, walking up the street, and my 11-year-old sister blurts out the words, "Brian's gross." Well, that's all she had to say, and I stood there in the street, shocked, thinking I was his only victim. But I'm going to tell you, you know anything about predators, and I know many of you in this room do, if they're doing it to one child and getting away with it, it is very likely they're doing it to other children. So now I have my sister coming to me, and I knew, but with her coming forward, as angry as I was, maybe somebody would believe us. We told our parents the next day. As you can imagine, with many parents, they were devastated, horrified. My dad came home from work. First thing he said to me when he walked into the kitchen, "Erin, why didn't you tell me he was doing this to you?" And I looked at him and I said, "Dad, because he told me you and everybody else would not believe me." My mother was bawling all day. There was no way I was about to say, "Mom, Brian's not the only one. This was going on when I was 6, 7, and 8. You know, when I put my hand through the window, all the behavior problems I had, I mean, they made me repeat first grade because of how bad issues I was having at that time in my life." So I kept that still a secret, and soon my father is now walking over to his sister's house, confronting her, letting her know what we have just disclosed. As you can imagine, she was shocked. She talked to my cousin Brian, and just as he told me, he denied it. Called us liars, said he never did anything, and he was sticking to his story. My parents just wanted him to get help. They weren't looking to have him locked up. They just wanted to make sure that he did not repeat this again. Why did he do this? Well, my aunt and uncle wouldn't work with my parents. So after my mom made numerous phone calls to law enforcement trying to decide what to do, eventually my mom sat down with my sister and I and said, "We're going to have to go talk to some people about what Brian did to us." One of the first things was I'm thinking I'm going to speak to a police officer. And all I'm thinking is, am I going to be interrogated? Are they going to try to figure out if I'm telling the truth or not? What if they don't believe me? I was upset. I told Mom, I told you, why do I have to tell anybody else? Well, the place that we were going to was not a police department to talk to a police officer. No, I found myself a few weeks later brought to a place like Davis House, the Children's Advocacy Center in the suburbs of Chicago. I walked into that place with all this fear and anxiety. Filled with shame, I didn't want to talk about what this cousin of mine had done. I sat there in that waiting room, dreading an entire day, could not wait to be out of there. Soon an advocate arrives, takes my mother into her room, and is talking to her, and I can hear my mother sobbing, saying she failed her children, she missed all the warning signs. Well, then, after she came back into the room, the next woman appeared. Her name was Megan, and she was the forensic interviewer. She said because I was the older sister, if I would come with her first to talk, and then she'd come back with my little sister, who was sitting next to me very nervous about also being there. And I'll never forget that long walk down the hallway, all of the stuffed animals on the floor, that she told me when we left I could take one home. Told me to choose what room I wanted to be in because she wanted to make this as most comfortable knowing how traumatic of a situation that I was about to talk about was. So I went into this room and started talking to her, still not trusting this woman, fearing, is she on my cousin's side? Is she on our side? What if she doesn't believe me? Am I going to be in trouble? Because this is stuff that I had always been told growing up. No one can get you, no one will believe you, I know where you live. Well, I soon, the more I talked to this woman, I realized she was on our side. She was supporting me. I suddenly started feeling more comfortable sharing these details with her. She told me she believed me. She told me my cousin would never hurt me again. And the last question she asked me is, what do you want to happen to your cousin? And I'll never forget it. I told her, I just want him to get help so he never does this to anybody else. I don't want anyone else to ever experience what he had done to me and my sister. I met my little sister in the hallway, and I looked at her as she's sitting in that waiting room. These people are on our side. We have nothing to be worried about. Well, next day, that detective who was sitting on that two-way mirror watching my interview called my cousin into the police department. My aunt and uncle were convinced he was going to continue to deny it, but to all of our shock and surprise, he confessed. He was put under arrest. Now my parents had a decision to make. Do they take this to trial, or do they go the original path and just get him the help that they wanted to get? Well, they went that path because then my sister and I would not have to take a stand against him. My parents thought that would traumatize us even more. I'm still keeping what happened when I was 6, 7, and 8 secret. And we just wanted to move on with our lives and begin the healing process. Well, my parents stuck us in family therapy. They found a therapist just for each of us to see individually. I didn't want to talk about this in front of my parents, and I didn't want to talk about it just with this woman that I didn't know who she was. I just wanted it to go away. But something to know, as any survivor, and I know there's plenty in this room, it doesn't just go away. You carry it the rest of your life. Well, I was having nightmares, flashbacks, therapy was not working. Finally, several months after our interview, my parents called the Children's Advocacy Center and said, is there any way you can help her? We can't get her to talk to a therapist. She won't talk in family therapy. Is there anything else we're missing that can help her because she's so severely depressed? Well, they just happened to say next month there's a girls group starting for survivors of abuse. Maybe if she's in a room with other girls that can relate to her, maybe that'll help her start talking and healing from her experiences. Well, they were spot on, because it's in that room that I finally started to realize my closest friends didn't get it. But I'm now in a room of a bunch of girls that completely understood what I had done, understood the nightmares, understood the flashbacks. They got me. Whereas I said, majority of my other friends didn't. One even said, you're not being abused anymore. Shouldn't you be over this? And I don't blame her because she didn't understand. If you've never walked in the shoes of an abuse survivor, what it does to your life, even long after you're not being abused anymore. But it was through the Children's Advocacy Center that I like to say laid the foundation of my healing. Made me feel supported, loved, that I did not get from my extended family, who even after my cousin confessed, continued to disown us and support the perpetrator. Well, not only did they provide services for me in a girls group, they provided a girls group for my younger sister, and they also had a parent support group because, like many parents, my parents were blaming themselves. They were beating themselves up. Why did I not see the warning signs? They helped prepare them for what the journey will look like as your children get older. How this, things might be okay for a few years and how this might impact them when they're, in their late teens. What to, as they told me, what to expect as you go on in life in dating relationships, trust issues, intimacy, having children, all these things they covered, and I can still remember all of those topics and gained so much information from it. But what I really gained from the CAC was reclaiming my voice and deciding, as I move forward in my life, wanting to put a face and voice on this silent epidemic.